Hello guys and girls, and welcome to today's lesson. As you can see here on the screen, the topic that we're going to be focusing on today are the basics or the elements of photography. I'm actually super excited to dive into this because I personally love to take pictures, and I want you guys to remember that the first 9 weeks we really focused on making our classroom a newsroom. We did quite a bit of writing, and I know you guys worked really hard, and so we're going to take just kind of a short break from the writing part of journalism to focus on another type of journalism, which is called photojournalism. And when you are a photojournalist, instead of trying to still tell stories through writing, you try to tell stories through pictures. And so, like I said, we are going to be taking some time to focus on that. You should have your photo journal opened up to your next blank page because you are going to be taking some notes today. So once you get there, go ahead and give your notes a heading up at the top that says Photography Basics, the elements of photography. And once you've done that, we're going to dive in here and get started. The first question that we need to make sure we address is what makes up a photograph? So I know a lot of you all have social media. You have things like Snapchat, TikTok, Instagram, and so you see the pictures that people take all the time, right? But in this unit, we're going to be focusing on what's the difference between just a random person who points their phone and snaps a quick photo. How is that different from what an actual photographer does, right? Because photographers are getting paid for the pictures that they take. And what we're going to be focusing on is the difference between taking pictures and making pictures. And we're going to look at some examples of that here in just a second. But when we're trying to think as a photographer or as a photojournalist, we have to make sure that we're paying attention to all the elements of the photographs that we take, right? We're not just randomly pointing our phone at something and snapping a photo. We're being very intentional about what goes in our photograph. And so we're going to be going over some different elements of photography and talking about how we can incorporate those different elements to make a really, really awesome picture. I do need you guys to go ahead and copy what you see here on the screen, and once you have done that, you can go ahead and move on. Let's talk for just a second about the difference between those two words that I mentioned on the previous slide, which is taking a photograph and making a photograph. If you are just taking a photograph, you are doing what 99% of the world does when they are using their phone or using a camera to take a picture. You are just grabbing a snapshot of a moment in time. There's probably not a lot of pre-planned thought that goes into taking that picture. You're just sort of pointing your camera at something, hitting the button, and seeing what comes out of it. It's a common everyday kind of photo. And that's what we see here on the screen. It looks like these people are participating maybe in some kind of bike ride or bike race, but when I look at this picture, nothing really stands out to me. Like there are a lot of people, there's some trees, I can see the sky, I can see the road, but there's nothing in this picture that really pops out to me. This is an example of taking a photograph. I do need you to copy what you see here on the screen, and once you've done that, you can move on to the next slide. Here's an example of someone who is making a photograph. Now, we can obviously see that this is the same event because I still see lots of people riding their bikes. I see the trees, I see the road, but this photo is a lot more artistic. You can tell that more thought went into this. And as a photographer, you need to be paying attention, like I said, to what you are trying to capture in your photo. And I know we haven't gone, excuse me, I know we haven't gone over the elements yet, but we're going to here in just a few minutes. And so you're going to have to be thinking about what are the elements that make the focal point of this photo stand out. So when I look at this photo, my eye is immediately drawn to this little guy right here. And we're going to be talking about what are the elements that the person who took this photo chose to include that made our eye go to this guy. Please go ahead and copy what you see here on the screen. And once you've done that, you can move on. So here are the elements of composition that we're going to be applying to our photography skills. You don't have to copy these. This is just kind of giving you a little heads up of what's to come. We're going to focus on line, color, shape, contrast, emphasis, texture, and space. So as we Move forward through the rest of our slides today, we are going to be getting a definition for each one of these, and we're also going to be looking at some examples of these as well. So let's talk about line first. We have a definition up at the top. Line is the path that your eye follows in a photo. It can lead you to what's important. We all know what lines are, right? But we know that lines in a photograph can be very effective. So for example, if we look at this picture up here, on the left, we have these nice, really arched lines, and these lines help draw our eyes immediately to the focal point of the picture, which is right here. And so we know lines can be used to lead your eye to a focal point. Lines can also be used to create patterns and shapes. So if you look at this photo in the upper right-hand corner of the screen, there are tons of lines that make up this ceiling. And when all of those lines intertwine and crisscross, it makes different shapes. So if I look here, I see diamonds, I see triangles, I see squares, and it makes a really interesting photo just because of all the lines that are in this picture. And finally, lines can be used to create a sense of movement, which we see very clearly in this picture at the bottom. Even though this is a still image, because of the way that the lines look, it almost seems as if the picture is moving. So we use those lines to create movement. Please make sure that you have everything that you see on the screen copied into your notes, and once you've done that, you can move on. The next element that we're going to talk about is color. Color are the hues in a photo that can set a mood or make things stand out. So color can be a very powerful part of photography. It can be used to create interest. If something is really bright and colorful, the eyes are automatically going to be drawn to that. It can also be used to create emphasis or to create a pattern. So again, we can use colors to make certain things in a picture stand out, to make certain things pop, and to just draw our eye to the elements that we want the people who are looking at our photographs to see. Please make sure that you copy everything that you see on this slide, and once you've done that, you can move on. The next element that we're going to talk about is shape. Shape is the outline or form of objects in a photo. Obviously, we know what our shapes are. It could be things like circles, squares, or triangles. Shapes can be used to create patterns as well, which we see in this photograph here. There are lots of different shapes that make up this photograph. I see a lot of rounded shapes in the stained glass windows, but it almost looks like all the stained glass windows have a cohesive pattern. So shapes can be used to create patterns, but shapes are also a great way to create variety in a photo and to emphasize a focal point. So in this shape, in this photo, we have the circles, but then within the circles, there are some interesting shapes as well. And so this is another photo that is a great example of how you can use shape to emphasize a focal point. Please make sure that you have copied everything that you see here, and once you have done that, you can move on. Next, we're going to talk about distinguishing shapes and overlapping shapes. This black and white photo is an example of distinguishing shapes. If we're distinguishing something, we are setting it apart or maybe even emphasizing it. So when we have distinguishing shapes in a photo, the shapes are usually isolated, meaning they're kind of by themselves, and it helps to create emphasis in the photo. So we have this big circle and looks like maybe a square here on the left. It's distinguished, it's kind of over here by itself, but it also makes the man stand out in this photograph. So distinguishing shapes can be used to create emphasis. And then overlapping shapes are shapes that are sitting on top of each other. And if we take a photograph where we have some overlapping shapes, it helps to create repetition, but it also helps to make the photograph look unified, make it look like it is a cohesive photo. Please make sure that you have copied what you see on the screen, and once you've done that, you can move on. All right, the next element that we're going to talk about is contrast. Contrast can be the difference between light and dark. It can be different colors, and we can use those things to make certain photographs pop. So when we're talking about the difference between light and dark, we really see this in a couple of these photographs. Here, for example, the grass is really light while the dirt is really dark. And then the rocks are kind of a lighter color while the dirt is really dark. And so that helps to create some contrast in this photo. Down here at the bottom, we have the light that's coming through the doorway, but you can tell that it's like either early in the morning or kind of getting late at night. And so we have that contrast between light and dark. And then black and white photos are a great way to create contrast because you automatically get the dark and the light together. Contrast can also be used just with color. So this red and green that we see with the door here are contrasting colors, which makes the door really pop. So contrast can be used to emphasize a focal point. This little boy is the focal point of this picture. He's kind of what our eyes are drawn to first. The door is the focal point in this picture. The doorway is the focal point in this picture. And so we can see how contrast can be used to draw our eyes to that focal point. Contrast can also be used to help different textures stand out from each other. And I feel like we see that really well in the picture of the grass. The dirt looks to be kind of soft while the rocks are a rough texture. And so we see the difference in the texture in those photos. Contrast can be used in your lighting. This is a great example here. We have the light coming through the doorway. In your color to help the subject pop, think complementary colors, like we've already talked about the colors in this photograph. And then in your juxtaposition of sizes, like if you have something really big next to something really small, that is another example of contrast, which we see here in the picture with the little boy next to the big dinosaur bones. Please make sure that you have everything on this slide copied, and once you've done that, you can move on. Our next element of photography that we're going to talk about is emphasis. Emphasis is the part of the photo that draws your attention first. It's where your eye is meant to look first in the photograph. It can be used to bring your attention to a focal point. Emphasis can be used through positioning, through focus and depth of field, and by framing the subject matter. So if we look in this upper left-hand corner, our emphasis is on the light, and we have some really cool use of contrast and also of shape in this photograph. I see lots of triangles, but my focal point is right here, and it's in the very center of the photograph. If you look at this picture, the focal point for me is this bike down at the bottom, but notice that the bike is not in the center of the frame. Typically, when we think about where we want to have our emphasis, we kind of put it in the middle of the picture, but that doesn't always have to be the case, right? The bike is down here almost at the bottom of the picture. So there's lots of different ways that you can play around with emphasis in your photographs. Please make sure that you copy what you have here on the screen before you move on. Next, we have texture. Texture is how something in the photos looks like it would feel if you were to touch it. Texture can be used to separate subjects from each other. We can see that here in this photograph. We have the leaves in the background, but then we have kind of this rough, old-looking building in the front, and we can definitely clearly see a difference in the textures here. It can also be used to emphasize value. So if we look here, there's a very big difference between this kind of bronzy color and the very dark background. And it can also be used to give information about a subject. We can tell here that this is probably a prickly cactus because of how close up this photograph is and because of the texture that we see. Please make sure that you copy everything that you see on this slide before moving on. Space is the area around or between objects, and it can be used to make a photo feel crowded or open. Both of these are examples of photographs that feel pretty open because we have a person who is really just a small portion of the picture, but they have lots of space around them. So space can be used to create a sense of depth, like how far away or how close something is, but it can also be used to define the focal point of the picture. Please make sure that you have copied what you see here on the screen, and then you can move on. All right, that is it for our notes for today. You should have all the definitions, all of the different elements of photography, and I do need to see your notes when you're finished. So if you have everything copied down, go ahead and bring me your photo journal, and I would like to take a look at that.